afternoon. Thank you. My name, for the response. My name is Camille Isaacs. I teach English here at OCADU. I feel a bit of a misfit for a couple of reasons. One, I don't have any slides. But also, teaching in English. I've been inspired by so many of your stories, and I don't know many of you. But hearing about your practice and your work, I'm hearing and feeling so many connections. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this conference, even though I work in a slightly different field. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I teach English here at OCAD, but also I'm in a non-permanent position. And I mention that because I do want to talk a little bit about precarity a little bit later at the end. And I say that as my former dean sits in front of me, to whom I used to report.
You go ahead.
You go ahead. He's not my dean anymore. Anyway, so in terms of... I'm just digging the hole deeper. So in terms of what I've been up to, I've spent the last year working on this book here, Austin Clarke Essays on His Work. It's a part of the Canadian Writers series put out by Guernica Press. For those of you who are interested, it's actually launching on Sunday. Austin Clarke will be there, George Eliot Clarke will be there, I will be there, at Ben McNally Books. So it's on the website if you're interested. And this contains a number of critical articles on Austin Clarke, everything from his superb Toronto trilogy to his more recent, more awarded work, The Polished Hoe and more, but also, his nonfiction writing, such as Pigtails and Breadfruit. So I think he's a seminal author in the Canadian scene, and he deserves to be rewarded for that. But in terms of my current research, I find myself interested in various diasporas. And the two projects that I'm working on right now, they are works in progress, so please forgive me, I haven't entirely come to any conclusions about their status. But one of the projects that I'm looking at is S.A. Dubian's Half-Blood Blues. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of this because it's gotten such wide press. But when I first read it, it immediately called to mind, to me, Claude McKay's 1929 banjo. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this work, but they are so very similar. We have in both these works two multinational, multi-ethnic jazz bands trying to eke out a living in France, interwar period, and essentially there are two black diasporic populations. Now they both end, I don't want to say they end badly, but the black diasporic community that is established in the interwar period is not sustainable in either case. And I thought it was interesting that two works written almost a century apart came to the same conclusion, that these black diasporic populations were not sustainable. And so I was interested in, one, what drew this black diasporic community together, and two, what tore it apart. And it was a few things. The fact that a band plays a significant role in both books, I think, is significant. And what we see is that music functions as a language. For these multi-ethnic, multinational characters, they often didn't speak the same language. If you're familiar with Half-Blood Blues, we have Hero Falk, who's German. We have a few other German characters. We have the African-American players. And they didn't all speak the same national language. The language that they had in common was music. In fact, at one point, Delilah, who's one of the few female characters, introduces Hero Falk, the German character, the black German character who was eventually sent to a concentration camp. She introduces Hero to Joe Louis, famous American trumpeter, and she says to Joe Louis, here's Hero Falk. He doesn't speak your language, he doesn't speak English, but he speaks your language. And in that case, the language was the language of the jazz trumpet. Okay, so we see both books' music functioning as a language. However, both groups fall apart. In Claude McKay's banjo, it falls apart because of the Great Depression. And in Half-Blood Blues, the Nazi occupation of France ends this multi-ethnic group that has come together. So we see that although music and various other things work to hold the community together, in times of crisis, music becomes dialect. it becomes a less important factor in holding the group together. And there are a few other factors that held them together. If you're going to have a Black national, international group, you have to have good health. Both these books break down in part because the characters have bad health. Hero Falk has the stomach ailment, he goes in search of milk. In Banjo, we have these characters having to declare a national identity in order to secure health care. So in this work that is still in progress, I look at what holds the community together and what tears it apart. I see Heidi flashing at me, so I'm going to move on. So that's where my work is focused at the moment, looking at various diasporic populations. I'm also looking at Robin Hodge's cockroach, and this idea of otherness being displayed through non-human forms, and tying it to an 1897 work called The Beetle, which has a shape-shifting character that moves between not just human and non-human, but also between male and female. So that's the way that I'm kind of exploring diaspora at this point in time. And to get back to my precariousness, I've heard so many of you say that you're interested in the invisibility of Blackness in the arts, in curatorial practice, in museums. And I think it goes hand in hand with the invisibility of Blacks in academia and in media and in various other realms. So part of what I'm interested in is how we can talk about our invisibility in academia specifically, so that we can, one, try to rectify, try to ensure, Audrey mentioned in her presentation about how do we change the way that education goes forward, how do we bring these various groups into the classroom. And it happens in part by making sure that the staff teaching those classes are permanent, who have jobs, who can be there on a about increasing our presence, we need to increase our presence across the board, and we work hand in hand together. I recognize there are scarce resources, but that doesn't mean we have to elbow each other out. We just need to make sure that there's more room for us through places like this, because certainly I don't think that OCAD would have thought of having a conference like this if it were not for Andrea. And so, so we have to continue to do things like this and have more of us in places like this so that we can spread the wealth, as it were. So thank you.